You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds. I'm Brian Cameron alongside Zach Chavalella, and the Eagles are coming off a 27-13 victory. But before we talk about the Birds, how are you feeling, brother?
Man, I'm feeling pretty good. I'll be honest with you. I've had one of the best days of my entire life. Spent the day rolling with the Philly Specials motorcade, hanging out with guys like Jason Kelsey, Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, Charlie Hall, the War on Drugs, Pete Davidson for some fucking reason I don't even know. But it's been a good day. Been a good day. How you feeling, man?
I'm feeling well, man. So I think we can say Pete Davidson is now the newest adopted celebrity Eagles fan.
He's the king of Fishtown. He's Philadelphia's adopted son. In his own words, he's an honorary Eagles fan. And when I said "Go Birds" to him earlier today, he responded with "Yes, sir," which is not exactly right, but it's a step in the right direction. You know,
I mean, that confirms he's a Flipping the Birds fan at least, because that's been the way.
I mean, that's what it sounds like.
Longest.
It sounds like he had listened to quite a few episodes of Flipping the Birds. So.
But speaking of quite a few episodes, right? The Eagles have changed the episode on their.
That's the worst segue that I've ever heard, man.
You know,
that
I
was
froze on it
absolutely worst. That's a stationary segue, man.
It sounded great in my head.
Horrendous.
The moment I said it was just like shit. Like this is gonna go down the rabbit hole, and it's just not gonna work out. And I was hoping
Speaking
that
of episodes, we got another episode of FTB where we're going to talk about the Eagles' latest victory here. 10 straight, a franchise record. I mean, that's awesome. And who would have thought?
You know what? You should have stepped up. You should have stepped up when you saw me.
Man. I gave you your opportunity. And listen, we all have performance issues at times. It was just your time, all right? But when we talk about 10 straight wins, what I want to focus on first, how great it is that when you look up in the Eagles history books, the franchise record for consecutive wins, that's now 10 after this latest win. The picture you see next to the head coach is one Nick Sirianni. I mean, now that's beautiful.
You've been waiting all season just to throw that out there, haven't you?
Man, listen, right? I'm just saying, like, and it's not a static issue. It's fluid. Like, there's times where his coaching's been unsatisfactory. There's times where he's been one of the best coaches in the league. The entire time, I've been right. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, he does have. Is it a record of 44-19 or 46-19 as a career head coach right now?
I'll say 46 is higher. Whatever's higher.
Well, he does have a winning percentage over 700, so we could go with that. He is in the history books as probably one of the more winningest head coaches in the league. I think he's like third or fourth, something of that sort. But yes, Nick Sirianni, which I ate crow a couple weeks ago, and I did state that hey, like he put his big boy pants on. He did a Homer Simpson and backed into the bushes, and he's let everything just marinate. And that's the best way to do it, right? When you go to a restaurant,
you gotta discredit him. So help me. Every single time.
When you go to a 5-star restaurant, the chef is not on the floor saying, "Hey, how do you like the dish? Hey, what do you want with this dish?" No, the chef is in the back. He's whipping it up. He's doing his thing. He's creating.
I don't think I appreciate that accent that you use there.
Use no accent.
Hey, Toots, how you liking the meal?
But I'm just saying, he's a 5-star chef. He's cooking up, and the Eagles are doing their thing. One of the bigger things that I've been mentioning for the last several episodes, and I think we all agreed on this, was that the passing game had to show up at some point to show that they're getting into some type of rhythm. I love the quick passes, the quick reads, the trust, the confidence was everything we've needed to see from Jalen Hurts. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so this game pissed me off at the same time because
What?
well, I not it wasn't anything that the Eagles did. It wasn't anything about Jalen. It wasn't anything on the field. It's because we all knew what the reaction was going to be off the field, right? And that's that somehow, some way, some force outside of the team was due
Ah,
credit for what had
that
happened.
that
And that's the ludicrous thing. That's why I didn't even want the Eagles to cave and to show off the passing attack. And to be fair, I don't think that they, you know, did anything according to anyone else's plans or anything like that. Brandon Graham, you know, just horrendously bringing this up on his program, which he admitted was a mistake, and I think it's right. It's a huge mistake. All of that, I don't think that banded the team together. I think this team was together. I don't think this team ever stopped being together. I think that they had some things they had to work on in the passing game. Jalen not properly reading the routes and guys who were wide open. And in this game against Pittsburgh, they went with the most logical approach against the Steelers defense, and that was to attack them in the passing game. This Pittsburgh Steelers defense is tenacious against the run. They are one of the best run stuffing teams after Philadelphia, mind you, but still one of the best run stuffing teams. You got guys like Cam Hayward up front. So what do? You attack him in the passing game where they're a little bit weaker with guys like Joey Porter on the outside. And I think that's really all that you saw. Jalen was Jalen. He never stopped being Jalen. This is why I kind of like his bit of sass after the game because like the thing is like Jalen could do a lot of these things. Now the one thing that I will say is Jalen absolutely missed reads over the past few weeks. We can't forget about that. But this is for that crowd that said Jalen Hurts is not an NFL caliber quarterback. And yes,
So is that what y'all wanted to see, huh?
it's a small minority of people, but there's people who said it. It's stupid, never really deserved attention. But for them, yeah, no, Jalen Hurts is absolutely an NFL quarterback. He is, I would put him probably in the middle to back end of that second tier, if not at the very top of that third tier. Depends on how you structure these tiers. But he's a damn good quarterback, and he showed it this Sunday. And that makes me feel great moving forward into really what is, and I hate to say it ahead of time, one of the easiest closing stretches in the league.
There it is. The jinx.
Said at some point. At some point, it had to be said.
I agree with you, right? Like, and I've always said that Jalen, like, still to me, Jalen is a top 5 quarterback in the league. I put him right up there with Burrow, with Lamar, with Pat Mahomes. One thing that I feel like he has above all those quarterbacks is his mentality, his poise. Like, there's nobody that can take an L during the game and still be confident that they can pull out a victory like Jalen Hurts. There is no quit in him. There is no backing down. There is no panic, like, which I feel like is so phenomenal. Like the fact that he's able to go through the motions of a game and just still be so chill. Like I need to be on whatever he's on, like every day. I need those kind of medications in my life at this point. But to see him poised, to see him deliver, we saw AJ Brown over 100 yards. We saw, I think Devontae Smith was also over 100 yards. Saquon took a bit of a back seat, but he still had, I think, over 70 yards, if I'm not mistaken. It was a complete game for the first time in a long time. And they didn't have to do it, right? But they did it nonetheless. And then they kind of flexed at the end when they had that 10-minute drive to end the game where you saw them just, attacking on the run. And can we give some little praise to Kenny Gainwell, if you guys are, I mean, obviously, back in the day Pokemon, right? Like, I feel like Kenny Gainwell is our modern day Ditto because he like kind of just masked his ability on the court, on the running backs that are next to him. Like the last year, he looked like DeAndre Swift. The year before, he looked like Miles Sanders. This year, he's looking like Saquon a little bit. And it's just like that's his role. Like he compliments the guys that are ahead of him. Well, that was rude. He compliments the guys that are ahead of him very well, and he's doing pretty damn good this year.
Talk about rude. Calling him Ditto's a little bit rude. Kind of the hooer of the Pokemon world. But for anyone familiar with the daycare. But no, I think he's done very well to kind of transform his game as needed for Philadelphia. And I mean, that spin move, that was a hell of a move. And that's something that like straight up was not in his bag.
No,
It's like he kind of pilfered Barkley's skill set right before that snap
little
and
Space
then just
Jam in
kind of
the
threw it
mix.
in. Like, yeah, exactly. And I think he looked like the perfect complementary back and a guy who I feel pretty confident, moving the rest of the way through this season. I mean, not that there's other options, but there's been a lot of people who've been a little afraid to kind of go to Kenny G and critical of Sirianni. Inside like the part of the 2-minute offense. They go to Kenny G for that. A lot of times in the red zone, we've seen them go to Kenny G. I think this is a good confidence game, good confidence booster, not just for him, but for everyone, basically. So I loved what I saw out of him. Sirianni certainly loved what he saw out of him. He went on and on and on about how much he loves Kenny Gainwell, and
That's one of his favorites. He put it out there.
that's great for him. That's great for him. Hopefully, his favorite does not disappoint from here, because honestly, I wouldn't mind incorporating him a little bit more. It kind of seems like the Eric Dickerson record is kind of out of the way. I'm kind of fine leaning on Kenny G a little bit to kind of close out these last 3 teams. Because honestly, if the Eagles handle business, they should immediately go back to being a run heavy team. This is, passing attack was great against Pittsburgh. The matchup called for it. Go back to ground and pound. Go back to controlling the clock, and just utterly dominating these teams. And a great way that you're going to be able to do that is running not just with Saquon, but also getting Kenny G mixed in there a lot.
Are you okay with Saquon kind of like taking the back seat to the record right now? Like just allowing him to save his body. I mean, he looked pretty banged up. He had that one
He
play where
needs
they caught him right in
140
the
yards
thigh.
a game, man. It's tough. Like for him to get that, it's like 140 yards a game. That's
And
pretty tough.
he's had games where he's almost put up 300 yards, and
I get it. I guess the way that I would put it is kind of go all in this upcoming game, against Washington. And
yeah.
go from there, right? Because if he can get it in this one, I mean, he can damn sure get it against Dallas and New York. So if he can get,
Imagine breaking a record against New York.
if he gets the 140, if he breaks 140 against Washington, I say go for it, because I think that you could listen. It shouldn't be easy to get 200 rushing yards against any NFL team. You can get 200 rushing yards against this Cowboys defense. Like that's especially behind this offensive line. You can get 200 rushing yards behind them. So if he can break the 140 against Washington, then he has my blessing to try again against Dallas. But I'm not actively proposing that they try and help him get there, just because that's still a long way. Like if you want to help him get to 2 Gs, I'm cool with that. I think I can support that. It's not as sexy a record, but it's still pretty crazy. So that's fine by me. At this point, I'm ready to just kind of control the NFC, especially after that Lions loss. Do whatever you can to get that top seed and just go healthy into the playoffs if you can help it.
So we'll discuss a little bit more about where the Eagles are in line with the Detroit and Minnesota, and what are the chances to take the number 1 seed. But outside of the offense, the defense, I don't know what it is, but every week I'm still extremely impressed as to where they are in the league right now, where they stand and what they are doing, from Zach Bond to Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams. Like the collective unit, even the rookies, like what Vic Fangio has done, I feel like it's got to be historical. I mean, at this rate, they held down the Steelers to only 13 points. They held down the Steelers, I think, to no positive yards in the first quarter. And Eagles offense also scored twice in the first quarter. I mean, one was a field goal, the other one was a touchdown. But still, how do you feel about this defense going forward? Like, are you like A1, like there's no offense that could beat this defense, or are you like kind of like there's still holes in this defense where it's like it's gonna get revealed at some point?
Well, first of all, what's up, Doc? I see you in the chat, man. Good to have you in here tonight. What I will say, I think a lot of Eagles fans watched that Buffalo Detroit game, right? And so to say that there's no offense that can get past this defense, we got to talk about the levels of what that looks like, right? Can you hold any of these teams to under 20 points? Probably not. Can you hold them to 30 so your offense can outscore them in some kind of like 33-27 matchup? I think this defense can do that. So I'm immensely confident in it. I'm thinking, as crazy as it sounds, especially Buffalo, I don't see a way that, especially with the way the secondary plays, that these guys can get past them. I don't fear Kansas City, who of course the Eagles would only play in a potential Super Bowl matchup. Minnesota, Green Bay, like what is that? No, not at all. And Detroit, I will not doubt Detroit, but man, these injuries are racking up. So
They lost Knuckles, right? I mean that's what David Montgomery is, right? He's the
they
Knuckles.
lost Knuckles. Yeah, he's Knuckles. Yeah, they lost Knuckles. They lost Kim McNeil.
Yes.
Who many will remember was the guy that who was that exec who wanted him over Milton Williams?
Oh, that was. I remember that.
Yeah, but the infamous moment with Howie Roseman in the
when he wouldn't give him the fist bump to Howie.
Yeah, which they both turned out to be really good players. So
Yes.
you can understand his point. But Milton Williams is pretty good. So, and I'll leave it at that. But I feel pretty confident about that choice in the moment. But no, when you look at this defense, I feel, again, the word is confidence in them. You look at the smoke of the secondary. I mean, man, who wants to mess with Keon Mitchell? Like that's the one thing, like from a technical perspective, he's so damn good already. From an attitude perspective, he's like prime Charles Woodson, man.
Did you see him go to the Slade's defense?
Man, he went hunting. He came from flying out the other side of the field, and he was ready. He was ready. He wanted all that smoke and more. It's incredible to see that out of a rookie who is talented and can at the same time kind of keep it in control, because he did all that in defense. It wasn't as though, like, people have had criticisms for Jalen Carter for his extracurriculars, which I'll be honest, I don't mind as much. I kind of love how Jalen Carter plays this game, and I didn't even mind what he did on that punt, specifically because it didn't really affect the Eagles as badly, because the ball had already been punted by the time that the foul actually occurred, according to the officiating crew. But the fact that Keon Mitchell is so focused in his little pissed off shenanigans, that's just cool, man. Like that's what it is. Like it's fun to watch. It's exciting. It's almost like Dawkins-esque. It's a fun time. It's a great time to be a fan of this Eagles team, just because this defense is not only so good, but in so many areas it's so young. I mean, you look at the safeties room, young corners, young defensive line, young.
Everybody's young on the defensive side except for Vic Fangio, but still he's pulling out all the stops, and I do want to acknowledge what,
mind you, that's the spot where you can be the oldest on the defense too. So that's the good part.
I do want to acknowledge Duck, who's saying Sirianni can't keep his crap together. He can be an example to younger players, and I get it. Like, there was that clip where it showed him kind of raging out towards Jalen Carter after that penalty, where he kind of just he pretty much smacked the offensive lineman, if I'm not mistaken. But then there's a clip that I feel like is just starting to rotate right now during in social media, where it shows Jalen Carter and Sirianni kind of hugging it out on the sideline later, where they acknowledge like, hey, like, we were in the moment kind of thing. But at the same time, like, that seems to be Nick Sirianni's strength. Like, yeah, it's out of pocket, it's in the wrong time, and it's always caught on camera. But at the same time, like what they're doing on the sideline, they're not paying attention at who's looking at them. Like they're in their own world, like they're in their own dimension where they're just focused on each other. And that's Sirianni's his emotional intelligence, I feel like, is what Jeffrey Lurie was gravitated to during those meetings. And he's been great with the guys. I mean, they all rave about him. If you speak to AJ, Quinion, Devontae, every single one of them will go to bat for Nick Sirianni because he connects with them at a level that nobody is seeing. No media member, no fan. They're not seeing what this team is seeing in Nick Sirianni, and that's I acknowledge that, and that to me that's a pretty great ability to have as a head coach.
It's truly unique too. I mean, this you talk about not many. There's not any who do it exactly like Sirianni. It's just I have no problem him getting into what looked like a shouting match with Jalen Carter on the sidelines. I think that there's this preconceived idea of what coaching looks like, and what people need to realize is that coaching is an art. It's not a science. There's different formulas. I'll call them recipes with it being an art. Like there's different ways to kind of get around to success. You can't just, and we've seen this with coaching trees, right? We've seen guys kind of try to replicate everything from a technical perspective that great coaches have done in the past. Talk about the Vic Fangio coaching tree. Guys go on from the Andy Reid coaching tree and just not have success, right? It's because that stuff matters, obviously, from a technical perspective, but what truly matters more than anything is the person, how enigmatic they are, how they command the room, how they command the respect of the team. Does the team actually respect them? You can have guys who are really good minds and just don't they don't implore respect from their guys, for whatever reason, be it that they're not caught up on all the latest trends, maybe they're, because I feel like you can kind of get those kind of in between guys where a guy like Andy Reid is so far gone that it's almost kind of like cool for the young guys.
Yeah.
But there's also those kind of in between guys where it's like, well, he's not in our world, and he's also not old enough where it's fun to kind of jump him in, if that makes sense. So for a guy like Nick Sirianni, who actively seeks to know his guys on such a deep level and to be kind of in the mud with them, as it were, like that goes a long, long way if you're a player, especially a young player. And again, we've talked about there's a lot of young talent on this team. So I don't care that you saw him and Jalen Carter getting into it on the sideline. I'll tell you this, Jalen Carter, you asked him straight up, he'll probably be one of the fiercest defenders Nick Sirianni at that same breath.
Yeah, and to be honest, like Jalen Carter in game versus Jalen Carter outside of the game, I've spoken to him in the locker room, and the guy is very down to earth, and he's very he's all about perspective when he looks at certain things. And I'm pretty sure after the game he was kind of like, "Yeah, coach, my bad. Like I let my emotions get the best of me," which it happens. Like we've all been there in sports where we just let our emotions just take over us. Wasn't a smart move by Jalen Carter. Wasn't a smart, confrontation by Nick Sirianni. But nonetheless, like the Eagles did pull out the victory, and it feels like they are the most scrutinized team in the NFL. They are the most overlooked. Not overlooked. They're the most looked into team in the NFL. Every aspect of this team is on national news. Whether it's Jalen Hurts, whether it's AJ Brown, BG on a local radio show blowing up, like it's all being speculated very heavily. But you have to admire the fact that this team will come out in the press conference and be like, "Yeah, it's nothing. It's just you guys," and they use it as fuel. Like that's their that's what pushes them at the end of the day, and I respect it. Like do what you got to do to win. But they're doing everything that they have to do, and Nick is keeping it together. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just admirable at this point.
Yeah. I mean, what else can you really say? Like they have the right mentality around it. They keep in-house stuff in-house. If it ever comes out for any seemingly drugged up reason and it gets out there, like they squash it, and I think that's the important thing is they're not putting a blanket over it, they're squashing it, and that goes a long way. Um, and you look at guys like the craziest thing about this whole thing was people questioning the relationship between Jalen and AJ, and that is if you know anything about their relationship, which their personal relationship, like everyone says it doesn't matter and this and that, and I think the proper way to phrase it is like it's not our business necessarily. They let us into that, which gave people a feeling of access to talk about it. So I understand that from the perspective of the outside of people feeling like they can talk about that relationship now. But the thing is, there was nothing anyone ever said to make anyone question the relationship in the first place. So I think the team did a great job of immediately squashing that aspect of it. Because
Well, I
again, at
mean,
no point.
what BG said made everybody question, and that's the issue at hand.
No, I'm not denying that. But what
Okay.
I'm putting BG under that media umbrella in
Okay.
that moment because he was not acting with the locker room's best interest at that moment. He was not acting like a Philadelphia Eagle at that moment. He was acting like and I'm not even trying to discredit WIP by mentioning him, but like he was acting like a radio host on a radio station. Like that's what his job was at that moment. So when you look at AJ's initial comments, and you can say shit like, so this is the thing too, like behind the scenes, things are said that you don't hear on the outside, and the context matters. And it's not just like the context of the moment, but the context of the relationship as well. And Brian can double down on this. Like you can have two people who have a working and friendly relationship who are combative at times, even in the moment, over ideology, in the heat of things, whatever the reason is. I mean, Brian and I butt heads all the time, for instance. Like, and we're not going out there and winning games for the Eagles or whatever, but like at the same time, like people would see if you saw our Slack chat, you would think that we hated each other. And at the same
I
time,
think
like
people do think we hate each other.
some people actually might think that we do hate each other. But like
Meanwhile, we're
I'm
texting in the
honest, like
background, like, "Hey, what you doing?"
we're joking about becoming neighbors and shit like that. Like we're two of the best friends in PSN, honestly. Like so that just kind of goes to show like it's never as simple as what you may perceive. And for a guy like BG, I think he kind of like fumbled over his words in that moment. I think he was looking to kind of say something, and when he brought up a relationship, he kind of meant it in more of like a grander sense of like, the on-field relationship. Like the way that people ran with it, where you have people starting rumors about getting people's like spouses involved and stuff like that. That's crazy nonsense. And I don't even think BG ever kind of touched on it to that point. But what BG even said didn't suggest that these guys were no longer friends. I think he phrased it poorly and it didn't help anything. But again, I think that he was kind of wearing his radio hat, not his Eagles hat. And I think that he kind of just fumbled over his words in the moment. So I do think you still have to put some blame on him for that moment. But the whole point, the reason why we're talking about this is how great of a job the team immediately did to squash that ideology immediately. And whether it was, squashing the relationship, problem rumors, or whether it was, squashing even AJ's comments, which people ran it with and said that AJ was saying that Jalen Hurts needs to get better. Well, and not that Jalen Hurts didn't need to get better in fairness, but on top of it, he said the passing game, which like straight up, like I don't think AJ was talking about himself in that moment. I will say that much because AJ had, if you see those routes that he was left open on, AJ had done a great job, but there are things that have to be done as a cohesive unit to improve that passing attack. Not all on Jalen Hurts. I think he even knows that. And I think when you look at this entire unit in terms of their passing attack, I think it's fair to say, obviously, that the passing game needed to improve and that the issues were larger than just Jalen Hurts. People have been talking about Jahan Dotson trying to fit in this entire time. Is that all on Jalen Hurts? I don't think that's all on Jalen Hurts. Again, you can put some of it on him, not all of it. The inconsistencies with Devonta Smith and AJ Brown. Again, some of it on AJ Hurt on Jalen Hurts, I should say. Some of it's been on the inconsistency between injuries. Some of it's just been on trying to feed it, enough mouths. The bigger thing at the end of the day is that Philadelphia was playing a winning style of ball. And for the most part, people were happy. The reason why there was some dissatisfaction in that moment was because they almost lost to a bottom feeding team. That was the inspiration for the comment, not a lack of touches, not some personal argument. The fact that they did not perform well enough on the field, and it was notable. So what do? They get back in the lab. They go up against what was clearly their toughest remaining game, at least on paper, a team who some argued were a tougher contest than the Baltimore Ravens, than the LA Rams, and they went out and they smacked them. So Philadelphia resoundingly answered all questions this past week. And listen, I think Corey wrote the article. He said it the best. They're done with the drama. That's it. The Eagles, they're done with the drama.
So, as you were saying all that,
Don't bring up the drama.
one of our writers at PSN, Anthony DeBona, as I'm pretty sure a ton of you know him, and I don't know if he's watching this show. He did tweet out that Jay Glazer did come out with a little bit of a tidbit about the drama surrounding.
I heard about that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So Jay Glazer mentioned that Brandon Graham and Dom DeSandro went to Jalen Hurts' house during the bye week and told him that he needs to connect more with the team. It's just to me, this is a non-story, right? But to me, this is also one of those things where it's like it comes out and it's like dude, we're just filling up the truck with gas at this point. Like you're just loading up the truck with gas to give this team a little bit more fuel to make that extended run that everybody expects them to make right now. I think they're actually the NFC favorites to reach the Super Bowl at this point. They're becoming a lot of people's Super Bowl favorites at this point. But again, it's just added fuel at this point, and it's mind blowing that it's all coming out right now. Because if I'm not mistaken, like during the 20, I'll never forget this, the 2022 season, a lot of things like this were coming out towards the end of the season as well. And I'll never forget after that that loss to the New Orleans Saints, where Jalen could have played, but they ruled him out. They didn't let him get on the field. The mood in the locker room was dark. It was tough. It was something that you didn't want to be a part of. And I'll never forget the seeing Jalen in the corner in his locker room just pissed off, and like you could see in the fire in his eyes where this kid was about to do some damage to the league. And it feels like they're walking down that same path right now. And it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a fun ride for the next several weeks heading into the playoffs.
Do you know why I don't care about that story? That Jay Glazer story? Not your story. Yours was great, Brian. No, not yours. The reason I don't care about the Jay Glazer piece is because they solved it. They fixed the issue. So why 10 weeks later am I going to start saying, "Oh, Jalen has problems staying, being in touch and connecting with his teammates"? Clearly, he doesn't anymore. Whatever issue they had is in the past. The team has moved forward. Everyone's doing great. Do I think that there's a chance that Jalen, kind of found himself in that position? Yeah, he seems like kind of a private guy. He seems kind of likes to keep to himself a little bit. I mean, I think that. I want to choose my words carefully. I don't want them incorrectly aggregated.
Don't do the PG on us.
What I think is that he's a guy who's a little bit reserved. It's not a one-to-one comparison, but the Sixers have seen this with Joel Embiid, where he's kind of more of a private guy. He's not necessarily kind of go out to the clubs kind of guy. But there's such a big difference between the way that Jalen Hurts wasn't connecting with his teammates and the way Carson Wentz wasn't connecting with his teammates. Right? I think that's the big thing. And so help you if you make this about something that's not. I'm not talking to you, Brian. I'm talking to everyone else. The bigger issue is that, or I guess the bigger difference, Carson wasn't willing to adapt his personality. Jalen has gone out of his way to be the type of leader that a football team needs. And that's, again, why I'm not worried about this, because, man, they solved the problem. Like, so what are we even talking about anymore? Like, why don't we talk about the fact that they won 10 straight?
Yeah, and I completely agree. And I want to kind of nip this in the bud while Doug says this. So Doug is saying Jalen has a fiance problem and a possible baby problem. Remember what happened to Wentz after he got married and had the baby? I want to put kind of put it out there. And from what I was told, the situation with Wentz was purely Wentz. After they won the Super Bowl, Carson kind of had a bit of an issue with how they got to the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl. He had an issue with the fact that the offense was so easy to run that people were questioning who Carson Wentz was. And Carson wanted the playbook to be changed entirely, which led to the downfall of Carson Wentz. This wasn't a fiance issue. It wasn't him, having a baby. It was purely just ego that got in the way. Had Carson not touched the offensive playbook, had Carson not given coaches a hard time, Eagles would have been right back where they should have been. That's not Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is a private guy, like Zach was mentioning, because he knows what it is to be in the spotlight. Like not too many people want to be in the spotlight just to be in a spotlight. Like a lot of people like Jalen Hurts is just like he's doing what he loves, but at the same time he respects his personal life. And not a lot of people, not too many people, players out there respect their personal lives. You have I hate to say things like this, but you have them going completely out on Instagram, commenting to fans. You have their wives doing crazy things on Instagram. That's not the Hurts family.
Or you got people like Fletcher Cox who just find themselves in the news sometimes.
Yes, exactly. Like that's not Jalen. And that should be admirable, because at the end of the day, like that's what makes him so great, is that this guy, when he's on the field, is football. When he's off it, radio silence. Like this guy's like Batman. Bruce Wayne during the day, Batman at night. You don't know who the hell he is.
Yeah, no, and it's tough, and I think it's one thing that like kind of makes it a little bit hard for fans to kind of endear themselves to the player. I think there's a lot of people who kind of look at him like, oh, Jalen Hurts is so cool, and kind of have that perspective of it. But the thing of it is that he does go out of his way in things that aren't publicized. Like there was a little bit of press on it, but Jalen Hurts, the impact that he made across the Philadelphia school district, like over the past years, but this summer as well, giving schools air conditioners like that, like a crazy thing like that.
That's crucial too. Like a lot of people struggle with that stuff. I like
yes,
it's a struggle. Trust, that's crucial.
So for that kind of stuff that you don't like, you kind of hear about it, but you don't. The only reason you kind of hear about it is because he's the quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles. Like if he played for Cincinnati, and obviously like they got a star right now in Joe Burrow, but like I don't think anyone's hearing about Joe Burrow's charitable work like we're hearing about him buying the freaking Batmobile, like because he wants to be like Jalen. But so we're not hearing about that kind of stuff that Jalen's been doing, and that privacy like can kind of hinder that deepening of the relationship, and that can happen in the locker room as well. So again, like I'm not denying the story. I'm sure that the sources are fine. Pretty sure I have a good idea who the source is actually, but I'm sure the sources are speaking factual. Well, I'm sure they're good enough that they can at least be trusted. Anytime information gets out, it's out for a reason. My larger point is none of it matters, because again, the way that story ends is that they fixed whatever problem there was. That's the bigger takeaway from the situation.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And it seems like, at this point, like I'm for whatever problems are going to keep arising. And I don't want to discredit the media, right? Because they didn't gaslight the situation, right? Like BG said what he said, and the media did their job. they did their job. They spoke about it, right?
We are the media too, like, so we don't want to, like,
Yeah.
we're not trying to pretend that, you know, we're not a part of this larger group that is sometimes the problem. Like, the thing that I want to say real quick is that, like, the struggle, and if there's anyone out there who is either active or pursuing any role in media or journalism, this is important to know. The struggle is that when you have media personalities, especially like journalists and reporters, but general media personalities that do things that make the news, that reflect poorly on the industry as a whole, that reflects on you. Like, that reflects that if there's a beat who has got their head up their ass, I'm not even gonna give an example. I'm just gonna go with that. And starts, you know, trying to talk that way, that reflects poorly on Brian. That reflects poorly on myself, especially if there's someone in the Philadelphia market, right? So that's where you kind of have, I think there's actually a fair amount of camaraderie at times between local, especially journalists and reporters. But that's where you can kind of lose that, is that there's also this sense of trust, almost like its own locker room in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
where, like, if you're out there doing stuff for you at the risk of lessening the credibility of everyone around you, there's going to be issues. And I think that's where, kind of, you know, for anyone who might kind of feel like, you know, oh, you're making too big a deal out of what happened on the radio or whatever. It's like, well, no, because at the same time, it kind of, like, turns a little bit of this work into a joke, which we like to have fun. We like to have a good time. Obviously, you know, on this podcast, we like to have a good time, but at the same time, like, man, we take this seriously. Like, the amount of work that Brian and I have poured into this over the years, in addition to the other work that we have in our lives, like, this is a serious thing. So it's something where you can have fun, you can have a good time, but you can't be reckless. And that's whether, you know, whatever type of media you are, you know, if you are print, if you are digital, if you're a beat reporter, if you're in radio, whatever the case may be. So anyway, I'm rambling now, but that's effectively, I just kind of wanted to get out there why that continued focus on our end is because there's fallout from stuff like that. There's fallout, you know, in the relationship between media and fans, for instance, that
Yeah.
even if your company's not the one that did, or you're not the one who did anything that caused those issues, you can potentially see negative fallout from that, from a reputational standpoint.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a stain. It's a stain on the entire outlook of how the market reports at the end of the day. So listen, we covered the offense, we covered the defense. I'm
Special teams. Do we got a
I don't
punt
know.
returner problem? He
We-
fumbled a ball once. We gotta cut him.
But Braden Man was a little, you know, he wasn't on par as he was in Baltimore this week. But I wouldn't really, I'm not gonna, you know, rant on him or anything of that sort.
He's had a great season. It wasn't his best game. He'll be fine in the next game.
It's not a big issue. But one thing I do want to ask you, right? We've had the 2017 Eagles. We had the 2022 Eagles. We now have the 2024 Eagles. Is this the best version of the Eagles that we have seen? In my opinion, this is the most complete version that we've ever seen defensively, offensively, the way they complement each other. I feel like I have not seen an Eagles team this great. I don't even say good, this great. Whether they win it all or they don't, like, this team is the formula, the trust, the commitment to on defense to lay it to tackle that with the intensity, with the effort, the commitment on offense to make things happen and not quit. Even from the coaching staff, the commitment to this team, like, this to me is the most complete Eagles team that I've seen in a very long time. Do you feel like this is possibly the better version of those three versions?
Ponder that with a Bud Light. So if we're looking at, so again, we're talking all post Reed, right? We're just talking about 2017, 2022, and then this year. Is that right?
We could possibly, let's go far back. We could talk about Andy Reid's days.
Well, yeah. So I mean,
but I feel like the NFC back then wasn't as competitive as they are now.
I'm for keeping it more recent.
Okay, let's do that.
Because the league has changed so much since then.
Correct.
The way that the game's played has changed so much since then.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you look at the way that Doug ran his team, and obviously one of these examples already has Nick, and the current one, of course, has Nick as well. I think it makes sense to kind of keep everything in that local family. I have more of the gin. It is in the basement, and I did not feel like going downstairs. So
it's one of those stashes that you don't touch unless it's a special occasion.
Honestly, I kind of am saving it because I have not found a liquor store by me that has it yet. I was told it's in Jersey, and I cannot find it. So,
I actually went to a liquor store where I went to go get some beer, and I did not see it there. So I did not get to.
I'm gonna have to reach back out to my Connect and figure out how do I procure more of this Miracle Miles Teller gin mixer.
I'm still beefing on the fact that Oktoberfest is only in October, but that's neither here nor there.
I mean, that's just the time of year. It's the time of year, man. I think I've actually even told this on the pod. Oktoberfest was a weird thing for me because as a homeschooler who I played on a homeschool basketball league, you're in Philadelphia, you're at Oktoberfest. I don't think you expect to enter a line immediately behind your basketball teammate from your homeschool team. Of all the people in Philly, that's probably the craziest thing that actually happened to me since I started taking this job was doing that. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent now. We're talking about how this team compares versus the other Sirianni team versus the Doug Peterson team. This team, this is the best defensively I've seen this team perform. Bar none. Clear, easy, move on to the next topic. Offensively, this is the best team on paper. The issue is when you look at the way under Nick Foles, which is part of the magical lucky run. I'm going to finish this point and then I'll acknowledge you, Morgan. That smoothness with which they ran that offense, it just operated so much smoother. And I think that you can see that potentially out of this team, but we haven't consistently really seen that as of yet because they haven't really needed to show it off. Like this schedule, I think, is also like a little bit easier based on who they've played. So, no, my mom was not the coach of my homeschool basketball team. One of the other dads of one of the other homeschoolers was the head coach, and got a lot of love for Coach Lippincott. I had one hell of a coach for it being a homeschool basketball team. So it's good times. But I would say that this team defensively ranks higher than any of those. Okay. Offensively, they have the potential to rank higher. And I think that the job Nick Sirianni is doing right now, Doug Peterson was in his pocket that year. There's no doubt about that. A lot of luck went into that Super Bowl, as does every Super Bowl, mind.
I mean, except for the Chiefs, they got the referees. They don't have luck.
Listen, sometimes luck comes in stripes. You know, they call them lucky stripes. So it's that's just how it is sometimes. But what's going on, Morgan? How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. Brian looked at me like a disapproving mother, wondering why I was so late at that party. You know what I mean?
Oh, it's fine. Brian was late too, so we were supposed to have a meeting, and he missed the entire meeting, so it's fine.
Yeah. Now the truth comes out. It seems like mine's like, where have you been?
Like, I was actually
you got your legs crossed, holding a glass of Chardonnay, in your towel in your hair, drying off. Man.
Yeah.
Why is he imagining you post shower? That was very detailed.
That was very detailed.
Listen, man, I live a vivid life. What can I say?
Okay, so off topic, but I don't know if Morgan still does because I don't really pay attention to Instagram. But Morgan's pictures on Instagram sometimes like the most random pictures that you'll ever see from anybody. Like there was one, I think it was like a dryer or a washing machine in the middle of a forest, and he was exploring.
Hey man, if you find a dryer in the middle of the forest, you gotta take a picture. No one's gonna believe you. No one's gonna believe you.
That is true, and it won't make a sound unless you took a video.
Yeah, so. And it also won't clean your dishes. To be fair, so
Well, it's a dryer, so it probably wouldn't do that.
oh yeah, I
Anyway,
meant a dishwasher.
but-
There was a dishwasher,
Okay.
but the dryer might not dry your clothes.
That's fair.
That's fair.
Especially not in Canada, right? Oh,
All right, guys, that's the podcast. Thanks for coming.
Go Birds.
Go Birds.
Morg, the question on hand right now is
Mm.
is this the most complete Eagles team out of the 2017, 2022, and now the 2024 Eagles?
I mean, it's hard to say yes, because I think that it's such a young team, and it's weird to say that such a young team in a lot of places is complete, but I think so, man. I think, you look at the 2017 team, and a lot of things went right. Like we talk about that team as the gold standard just because they won the Super Bowl, but realistically, that was kind of a lightning in the bottle year, right? Like there's a lot of things going right, and even after things went wrong, some things went right, right? So, overall, I think that a lot of pieces came together, and that was a fairly complete. Yeah, I mean, well, you caught me wrong. I'm just kidding. But I don't know what Mills looked like Brian, but
Yeah,
off
off on a
topic.
tangent, not how I planned it.
Yeah.
It's just getting chaotic.
But yeah, like I think the that 2017 team, like as much as it was a complete team, clearly they won. They were the best team that year. A lot of things had to happen. I think on paper this is a more complete team than that team. In a lot of areas, like your running back's better, your second receiver's better. Maybe your tight end's not as good, your offensive line's probably just as good. No, I miss Brandon Brooks, man, but that's a different story. And defensively, like Zach said, man, like it's shocking that a team this young and this new is coming together so well. But yeah, I mean, this might be the best Eagles defense in the last like 2 decades, realistically. You're on mute.
I muted myself after being off mute.
That's fine. It's actually preferred.
It's probably for the best.
We were pretty much commenting like just the growth of this defense. Like, I for one did not expect this defense to be where they are. I didn't expect them to be gelling the way they are. I didn't expect them to be given the effort. After what we saw last year, like there's an extra effort to tackle this year. Last season there was, hey, the guy's running by me. Oh shit, like, touchdown. Now it's more like, no, you're not getting by me. And if you get by me, the guy behind me is gonna just put the clamps on you. Shout out to Xavier Leggett. But yeah, like this defense is just the way they're growing. Do you feel like there's an offense in this league that could really put this defense on their heels?
I mean,
the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? You saw the Carolina Panthers do it. I think that the thing that's gonna give this defense problems, we've seen it in 2 different areas over the season. Is one, quarterbacks just getting creative, right? Getting outside the box. Like they have played some mobile quarterbacks, but also like this defense just isn't meant to freestyle as much because there's so much match in it, right? So there's so many match rules that you're not just sitting in a zone and reading from depth, and then when freestyling happens, you can kind of attach to routes and come downhill. Like you're matching, right? So if a receiver takes you deep, you're now the deep player, and then if he then comes back to the quarterback, well, you kind of got to match that, and then that's where it's communication based, right? So when you're relying on communication and not steadfast rules, like there's always going to be breakdown. So you saw a bit of that against the Panthers. The other thing that the Eagles might struggle against, and they have in the past, is just running backs that can create after the catch, right? So they saw that with Austin Eckler. So there's a couple of ways, but again, like if you're playing a team that is solely going to beat you based on quarterbacks, freestyling and making big plays, which unfortunately, the AFC has some of those guys. Right. And then if you're talking about running backs that can create yards after the catch, also you're looking at the top team in the AFC right now. The Bills might give them trouble. And that's really where I'm kind of looking at is I think the Bills offense. I mean, the Bills offense is giving everyone trouble. So there's that news. But I think that's where it's like a rock and a hard place, right? Like you're going to meet, it's going to be 2 behemoths kind of facing off, each kind of good at things that the other team isn't. But realistically, as long as they play their game, there's no breakdowns in communication. You talk about the tackling, man, like I almost want to attribute that to two guys. Zach Bond, who came in, mentally was, I don't even know if that guy misses tackles. Like, I don't like, you'd be hard pressed to find an example. And then CJ Gardner-Johnson, man, like he missed a lot of tackles early on, and in the last 8 games has 0 missed tackles. Right. And that's another guy, rated the most annoying guy in the league. Well, yeah, it's annoying to get tackled all the time. Like, I would be annoyed too. But it's that chip, right? That edge. It really does kind of permeate in that locker room. And I think, those two guys, realistically, there hasn't been that many changes, and the changes that were made were young guys who you kind of expect to, have some struggles tackling early on. That's just the way it goes. And so those two guys I really attribute, and obviously Vic Fangio and the coaching staff as well. But to me, it's mentality, and the mentality of this defense has changed a lot. They've really matured.
That's fair. So, I mean, that was Morgan kind of just laid the hammer down right there. That's a reference Ron's comment in the chat.
So help you.
Thanks, man.
So help you.
But yeah, I mean, listen, it was a hell of a game. They do have the Commanders, and we will preview the Commanders Eagles on Saturday. We do we have a couple minutes left in the show.
Can I just say one thing on the offensive side of the ball? We've been telling them for a while to throw a slant, and what do they come out of the game doing? They threw a slant. That was amazing. I love that.
I think he had like 2.6 seconds that he was waiting to throw, like when they were actually succeeding on offense.
Yeah, amazing. It's almost like they finally listened to us, which
exactly.
Usually turns out well for them, man.
Exactly. And it was progressive, and it was just, I hope they continue it. Even Tom Brady was raving about it. He was just glazing all over the way Jalen was kind of was running that game. But it should be something that should be implemented going forward, and it should be a thing. But yeah, we do have an unfortunate statement to make, or announcement per se. One that's a little bit it sucks. But we I feel like we do owe you guys to let you know, as well as we do owe it to the individual. Eric will no longer be with Flipping the Birds. He's no longer with PSN for reasons we can't really explain. But I do want to say that we greatly appreciate everything he's done for us. We greatly appreciate his presence, his jokes, his presence with us, pretty much his time with us. That does not go unnoticed. When one person moves on, it's always to greater pastures in their life, to get to a new level in their life, and we acknowledge that. We applaud that at the end of the day. So you will be just dealing with myself, Morgan, and Zach. And to Eric, we appreciate you greatly, man. Like, there's no hard feelings on our end. There's no love lost on our end at all. Yeah.
Love you, brother. If you're listening, hopefully you are.
What about? I think that was pretty good, right?
Yeah, you did a good job, Brian.
You did good, Brian. You did
all
good.
right, cool. But yeah, we'll be previewing the game on Saturday, at 9:00 a.m. as we always do. Until then, I'm Brian Cameron alongside Zach Chavalella, Morgan Burkett, and I promise you, I'm going to stall while I get this outro ready because StreamYard does not like me. We are flipping the birds.
Go Birds.
Go Birds.
You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome all to another episode.